Obama got attacked by Elizabeth Warren. Then Obama shut her down with one sentence. The Senate chamber was a cauldron of tension, its air thick with unspoken rivalries and the hum of anticipation. Rows of polished mahogany desks gleamed under the soft glow of chandeliers, each occupied by senators whose eyes darted between notes, tablets, and one another, sensing the storm brewing beneath the surface. The session was meant to address the allocation of disaster relief funds, a topic that carried the raw pain of millions still reeling from catastrophic floods across the nation, particularly in the Midwest. Barack Obama, the former president and now a powerful voice in the chamber, sat at his desk. His posture was relaxed, but his sharp, thoughtful eyes scanned the room with the quiet vigilance of a man who had weathered many storms, both literal and political. His hands rested lightly on a stack of papers, fingers tapping rhythmically, betraying none of the fire that simmered within. Obama was no stranger to the rough and tumble of Senate debates, but nothing could have prepared him, or anyone in the room, for the explosion that was about to unfold. As the chamber settled, a sharp screech pierced the quiet, the sound of a chair scraping against the polished floor. Senator Elizabeth Warren rose, her presence commanding, her eyes blazing with a fire that seemed to ignite the very air around her. She clutched a thick file, her knuckles white, and her voice cut through the room like a blade. "President Obama," she began, her tone laced with accusation, "the American people deserve answers. Why have you remained silent while communities drown in the aftermath of floods? While families lose their homes, their livelihoods, their loved ones? Or are you too entangled in your political alliances to speak for those you swore to serve?" A collective gasp rippled through the chamber. Senators froze, pens hovering over notepads as the weight of her words settled like a gunshot. Reporters in the gallery above leaned forward, their fingers flying across keyboards, already crafting headlines. Warren's attack was no mere critique. It was a calculated strike designed to humiliate Obama in front of his peers, the press, and the nation watching live on C-SPAN. Social media lit up instantly with hashtags like #WarrenConfrontsObama, as users dissected her words in real time. Warren didn't pause for breath. She slammed the file onto her desk, the sound echoing like a thunderclap. "You've been silent, President Obama, when communities begged for help. Silent when children drank contaminated water because infrastructure failed them. Silent when towns were wiped out by floods that could have been mitigated with proper funding. Is your loyalty to your party so blinding that you've forgotten the people who once placed their trust in you?" A smattering of applause broke out from her allies, their claps sharp and deliberate, but the rest of the chamber remained eerily silent. Eyes turned to Obama, waiting for a reaction. Would he falter? Would he deflect? The cameras zoomed in, capturing every flicker of his expression, every measured breath. But Obama didn't flinch. His face remained calm, almost serene, as if he were back on the south side of Chicago listening to the concerns of working families rather than in the crosshairs of a political ambush. Beneath that calm, though, something stirred, something deep and unshakable. Memories flooded his mind, walking through waterlogged streets after Hurricane Katrina, listening to families recount their losses during Midwestern floods, hearing the trembling voices of parents who had buried their children. He remembered the face of Mrs. Jenkins, an elderly woman in Illinois whose home had been reduced to rubble. Her hands trembled as she spoke of her grandson lost to the floodwaters. Obama had been there, not for the cameras, but in the quiet moments when despair hung heavy in the air. He had held hands, offered promises, and carried the weight of those stories back to Washington. And now here was Warren, accusing him of abandoning the very people he had spent his life trying to serve. The audacity of it burned, but he held his tongue, waiting. Warren pressed her attack, her voice rising to a crescendo. "Answer the question, President Obama," she demanded, pointing a finger at him, her eyes narrowing. "Why have you sat silent while your fellow Americans suffer? Why have you failed to demand accountability for the mismanagement of relief funds? Or is it easier to stay quiet and protect your political friends?" The chamber was a pressure cooker now, the tension so thick it seemed to hum in the air. Reporters scribbled furiously, their pens scratching like insects. A few senators shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing that Warren was playing a dangerous game. She was betting on Obama's reputation as calm, measured, and understated, not raw confrontation. She expected him to deflect with grace, to sidestep her accusations with his trademark composure. But she had miscalculated. This wasn't just about him. It was about the people who had been left behind, the families still living in trailers, the children drinking bottled water because their taps ran brown. It was about the truth, and Obama wasn't going to let Warren's theatrics bury it. Slowly, deliberately, he rose from his seat. The chamber fell silent, the air charged with anticipation. He adjusted his suit jacket, a small gesture that seemed to ground him, and took a deep breath. His eyes locked onto Warren's, steady and unyielding, like a man who had faced both history and hostility and refused to be shaken. When he spoke, his voice was low, steady, carrying the weight of someone who had seen too much to be intimidated by grandstanding. "Senator Warren," he said, each word deliberate, "where were you when families begged for help in the floodwaters, while you were busy sipping wine at Georgetown dinner parties?" The silence that followed was deafening. The silence was suffocating, heavy enough to smother the oxygen from the air. The chamber, so often filled with chatter, whispers, and the ritual hum of politics, now felt like a cathedral frozen in prayer. Senators looked at one another, unsure whether to breathe. A pen clattered to the floor, its sharp echo slicing through the stillness. Reporters in the gallery gasped audibly, fingers momentarily frozen above their keyboards. The cameras zoomed in on Elizabeth Warren's face, her confidence draining in real time, her lips parting but failing to form words. She gripped the edge of her desk, her hands trembling ever so slightly. It was the smallest of cracks, but in Washington, cracks could become chasms in an instant. Obama's words had not merely rebutted her. They had struck with the precision of truth, a truth everyone in the chamber knew but no one had dared to voice. Because Warren hadn't been to the flood zones. Not once. While Obama had walked the muddy streets of Illinois towns submerged underwater, speaking with survivors, promising action, Warren had been miles away attending fundraisers. She had clinked glasses with elites in candlelit rooms while families in the Midwest lit candles because their power was gone. And now, exposed before the nation, she had no retort. Social media erupted like wildfire. Clips of Obama's calm but devastating lines spread instantly. The caption, "Obama humiliates Warren," trending within minutes. Tweets rolled in. Did he just say that? This is the Obama I voted for. Truth to power. While Warren played politics, Obama remembered the people. Inside the chamber, Warren's allies tried to rally. A few clapped deliberately, their sharp applause an attempt to slice through the tension, but their efforts sounded hollow. Most senators stayed silent, their eyes flicking back to Obama, who stood firm, his gaze unwavering. And then, with deliberate calm, he sat back down. There was no smirk, no triumph. His expression carried no malice, only the weight of a man who had spoken a truth that demanded to be heard. His hands folded lightly on his desk. The cameras captured it all, Warren's pale face, Obama's steady presence, the chamber paralyzed in the aftermath. Behind him, a young staffer wiped her eyes. Her family was from Davenport, Iowa, a city gutted by recent floods. She had seen her own parents struggle to rebuild after the river swallowed their home. To her, Obama's words weren't politics, they were vindication. Later that evening, in his Senate office, Obama sat quietly. The city's lights glittered beyond his window, but his thoughts weren't on Washington. They were back in Illinois and Iowa, back with the people who had trusted him long before he ever became president. On his desk sat a folder, passed to him earlier that day by his trusted aide, Marcus. Inside was more than notes. It contained evidence, a whistleblower's report from FEMA, documenting how $1.8 million in disaster relief funds earmarked for flood infrastructure had been quietly redirected to a cultural project in Massachusetts. The connection. The nonprofit that received the funds had direct ties to one of Warren's major donors. Obama flipped through the pages again, his jaw tightening. Each line cut like glass. Money that should have gone to rebuilding levees, restoring water systems, and providing shelter had instead funded sculptures in a Boston plaza, a city untouched by the floods. He thought of Anna, a mother he had met in a flooded parish. She had told him, through tears, how her teenage son drowned trying to save their dog when the levees broke. "No one came," she had whispered, her voice hollow. "No one came for us." That memory burned in his chest now. He knew bringing this evidence forward wouldn't just target Warren, It would expose a system of neglect, corruption, and political favors that had been rotting Washington for decades. But after what had unfolded in the chamber, he couldn't stay silent. Not when Anna's voice still echoed in his ears. Not when thousands like her had been forgotten. The next Senate session was a powder keg waiting to ignite. The agenda, on paper, was routine, budget reviews, procedural votes, but everyone in the chamber knew something larger was coming. Obama sat calmly at his desk, the folder resting before him. Warren sat rigid a few rows away, her eyes burning, her allies whispering frantically. The air buzzed with nervous energy. When the floor opened for comments, Obama rose. The cameras instantly swung toward him. Reporters straightened in their seats, pens poised, knowing history was about to be written. "I'm not here," Obama began, his voice carrying with deliberate clarity, "to point fingers for the sake of headlines. I'm here because the American people deserve accountability." He lifted the folder, holding it up for all to see. This report details how $1.8 million in disaster relief funds, money meant for families who lost their homes, their businesses, their children, was diverted to a nonprofit in Massachusetts. A nonprofit tied directly to one of Senator Warren's key donors. A gasp rippled through the chamber. Even senators who had braced for a storm shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "This isn't about politics," Obama continued, his voice firm but never raised. "This is about Anna, a mother who buried her son because the levees failed. This is about children still drinking bottled water because their pipes run brown. This is about Americans left behind while relief funds built sculptures in a city that never saw a drop of floodwater." He set the report down. His eyes swept the room, pausing briefly on Warren. "This is about truth." The silence was thunderous. Warren shot to her feet, her voice sharp but shaky. "President Obama, these accusations are reckless. I have dedicated my career to fighting for the vulnerable. To suggest otherwise is a cheap political stunt." But her words rang hollow. Senators shifted in their seats, some staring down at their notes, others exchanging glances. The cameras caught it all, the quiver in her voice, the unease in her allies, the growing sense that Obama's truth was cutting deeper than any political defense could. Reporters hammered away at their keyboards. Headlines were already forming. Obama exposes misdirected relief funds. Senate erupts over Warren scandal. Back in Illinois, in a community church still scarred by flood damage, residents gathered around a battered TV to watch the live broadcast. Among them was Anna, the grieving mother. When Obama spoke her name, her story, she covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her face. "He remembered," she whispered. "He's fighting for us." A local journalist captured the moment on video. It went viral within hours. Across the country, Americans shared it with messages like, "This is what leadership looks like." And for Obama, the weight of the fight only grew heavier. Because this wasn't just about Warren. It was about exposing a broken system, and he knew that once he lit this fire, it would burn far beyond one Senate chamber. The motion to adjourn had barely fallen when the chamber erupted into a frenzy. Senators huddled in whispered clusters, reporters sprinted toward cameras, and aides rushed in and out carrying their phones like weapons. The confrontation was already on every network, clips of Obama's calm but devastating words looping endlessly. "Where were you when families begged for help, while you were sipping wine at Georgetown dinner parties?" By nightfall, America was on fire. Talk shows abandoned their scripts. Anchors spoke in reverent tones. This wasn't politics. This was a reckoning. Social media surged with hashtags. Hashtag Obama for the people, hashtag truth in the chamber, hashtag accountability now. Truck drivers in Mississippi shared shaky videos from their cabs, tears in their eyes as they thanked Obama for finally saying what they had long felt, "We've been invisible, but tonight, someone saw us." In Boston, protesters gathered outside the non-profit Sleek Glass headquarters, holding signs that read, "Funds for families, not sculptures." But the most powerful voices came from the flood zones themselves. At a vigil in Davenport, families stood in a circle, candles flickering against the damp night. Anna, the grieving mother, clutched a photo of her son and spoke through her tears. "President Obama gave my boy a voice. He gave all of us a voice. And we won't let them bury it under politics. Her words spread across the internet like wildfire. By morning, #AnnaSpeaks was trending worldwide. Back in Washington, Warren's office was in chaos. Aides argued in hushed but frantic tones. Draft statements piled on her desk, each one more desperate than the last. The evidence was undeniable: public records, redirected funds, emails surfacing from investigative journalists. For the first time in her career, Elizabeth Warren looked cornered. In the chamber the next day, Senator Margaret Holmes, one of Warren's longtime allies, rose with visible pain in her voice. "I have worked alongside Senator Warren for years," Holmes said carefully. "But the evidence presented cannot be ignored. I move for an immediate investigation into the allocation of disaster relief funds tied to her office." The chamber gasped. The vote was swift, bipartisan, overwhelming. Warren's face drained of color. She slumped in her chair, staring at the floor. The cameras didn't miss it. America didn't miss it. Obama, however, did not gloat. He returned to his office, weary. On his desk lay two items: Anna's handwritten letter, delivered by his aide Marcus, and a crayon drawing from a little girl named Lily in Baton Rouge. The letter thanked him for remembering her son, ending with the words, "Don't stop. We're counting on you." The drawing showed Obama standing in front of a crowd, a simple banner above him, "You spoke for us." Obama stared at them both, his throat tightening. These weren't trophies of victory. They were reminders of responsibility. He whispered to himself, "This is why we fight." The storm only grew. Investigations uncovered more instances of misallocated relief funds, not just from Warren's office, but across multiple agencies. The scandal expanded from one senator to an entire system, rotten with neglect and backroom deals. Across the nation, movements sprang up. In Louisiana, a group called Voices of the Flood printed T-shirts with Obama's sentence and organized rallies demanding transparency. In Ohio, factory workers filmed themselves holding bottled water, asking, "If he can fight for them, who fights for us?" Pastors played Obama's speech during Sunday services. Teachers added it to civics lessons. Even late-night comedians, usually eager to mock, paused in uncharacteristic seriousness, saying, "This is what it looks like when someone remembers who they work for." Meanwhile, Warren retreated into silence. Her allies abandoned her. Headlines shredded her reputation. She tried to issue a statement acknowledging oversight, but it rang hollow. The public saw through it. One evening, alone in her office, she watched the footage of Obama in a Louisiana gymnasium, speaking to flood survivors face to face. He wasn't behind a podium. He sat in a folding chair, listening. A young girl, Lily, handed him another drawing. "You keep drawing," Obama told her softly, his voice breaking just enough for the cameras to catch it, "and I'll keep fighting." The crowd erupted in applause, not for a politician, but for a man who had remembered their humanity. Warren stared at the screen, her reflection faint in the glass. For the first time, she looked not like a warrior senator, but like a woman grappling with regret. By the end of the month, the scandal had permanently altered Washington. A new bipartisan committee on disaster relief oversight was formed, its very existence credited to Obama's stand. Relief funds began flowing directly to affected communities, bypassing layers of bureaucracy. And the people, those forgotten in floodwaters, in burned-out towns, in neglected neighborhoods, felt seen. Obama never framed it as a personal victory. In an interview weeks later, he shrugged off praise. "This was never about me. It was about Anna. About Lily. About every family that's been told their pain doesn't matter." Leadership isn't about headlines. It's about listening, and refusing to stay silent when silence costs lives. Those words became the closing line of a viral montage: Obama speaking truth in the chamber, Anna whispering through her tears, Lily holding up her drawing. The video was titled simply, "You spoke for us." And for millions across the nation, it was true. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more. Share your thoughts in the comments, and see you in the next video.